She waved her hand like I was nothing but an interruption, barely glancing my way. "Oh, that's just my boring husband," she said with a casual chuckle that landed sharper than any insult ever could. I stood there, drink in hand, surrounded by her colleagues in the ballroom of a five-star hotel, the air thick with corporate ambition and champagne. Not even my name. Just boring husband. 15 years of marriage, and I'd become a footnote in her networking pitch. The room buzzed with talks of mergers and bonuses, but I was frozen, my face held in a smile so tight it hurt. It wasn't just that moment. It was the sum of all the little cuts she had made over the years. The dismissive tone when I talked about my job at the firm, the eye rolls, the deflections, the way her phone became more interesting than anything I had to say. I should have seen it coming. But I didn't. Or maybe I did, and just didn't want to believe that love could rot so quietly. We drove home in silence. She typed furiously on her phone, probably solving another corporate crisis. Meanwhile, my world had cracked open. Our house didn't feel like home anymore. It felt like a beautifully decorated cage where I had played the role of reliable husband, so well that I had become invisible. That night I didn't sleep. I stared at the ceiling while she snored beside me, my mind racing not with pain, but with clarity. I remembered the man I used to be, the man who once skipped class to hike solo up a mountain, who had dreams of starting a business, who once believed in passion and purpose. And now? I was a shell. But maybe, just maybe, that man wasn't gone. Maybe he was buried under layers of obligation, waiting to dig his way out. That night, something shifted in me. Not anger. Not sorrow. Determination. The next morning, I made her a smoothie, kissed her on the cheek, and smiled as she left. Then I opened my laptop, created a new file, and typed 2 words, exit strategy. Over the following days, I played the part of the perfect husband with an Oscar-worthy performance. I cooked dinner, laughed at her stories, complimented her new shoes, and listened as she vented about her incompetent assistant. But behind that well-practiced nod and smile, something far more dangerous was brewing. Every moment she underestimated me became fuel. While she booked conference calls and planned presentations, I studied. I spent hours researching legal loopholes, asset division, and international relocation options. I downloaded financial documents, cataloged everything we owned, and carefully documented what was mine by law. The second step of the exit strategy? Rebirth. I wrote down everything I had buried for her comfort, my bucket list, my postponed hobbies, my forgotten dreams. I signed up for a gym far across town under a different name and paid in cash. I hired a personal trainer and told him I needed a full transformation in 6 months. He looked me up and down, raised an eyebrow, and said, "Midlife crisis?" I smiled. "Something like that." The workouts hurt. My muscles screamed, my lungs burned, but it was the best pain I'd felt in years. Pain that meant change. Each drop of sweat was a step closer to becoming the man I used to be, the man she stopped seeing. Meanwhile, I sold the few dormant stock options she never knew I had. Quiet, steady, clean. The boring accountant was good for something after all. She noticed the physical change eventually. "You've lost weight," she said one night, glancing up from her laptop. "New diet at work," I replied with a shrug. "Looks good," she murmured, then turned back to her spreadsheets. I smiled to myself. She had no idea. Weekends became my sanctuary. While she worked emergency hours, I drove out to a small airfield and took my first flying lesson. The instructor was surprised. "You're an accountant?" he asked. "Not for long," I told him, gripping the yoke and feeling the thrill of altitude. I was flying again, not just literally, but in every sense. That feeling, that freedom? It was addictive. I knew then there would be no turning back. I continued living 2 lives, one meticulously curated for her, and one crafted entirely for me. Every morning after she left for work, I shed the skin of the obedient husband and stepped into my new identity like it was armor. At the gym, my trainer pushed me harder, and I welcomed it with a strange sense of gratitude. I was sore, exhausted, but alive. In the afternoons, I attended rock climbing classes, my hands blistering as they rediscovered a grip long forgotten. Evenings were for research, countries with favorable visa programs, jobs that allowed remote work, and companies that valued quiet brilliance over flashy ambition. I applied for several, polishing my resume until it gleamed. By the end of the third week, I had secured an offer, remote position, double my current salary, with the potential to relocate to their branch office in New Zealand. It felt like the universe had finally whispered, "Now." But the greatest performance was yet to come. She brought home an invitation, a gold-trimmed card to her company's annual gala. "You'll need a tux," she said flatly, sliding it across the kitchen island. "The executive board will be there." I took the card without a word, tracing my finger over the embossed lettering. She didn't notice the glint in my eye. That gala would be the stage for my final act. My masterpiece. As she climbed the corporate ladder, I prepared for a quiet and permanent disappearance. I rented a private storage unit and began filling it with essentials, a passport under my legal name but listed at a new P.O. box, cash in small bills, prepaid cards, and the tuxedo, not rented, but custom-tailored to fit the new version of me. By the time the gala arrived, she'd be celebrating a promotion, and I'd be vanishing in style. She had no idea I was slipping away right in front of her. I still cooked, still kissed her cheek, still played the part. But my eyes had stopped watching her. They were focused on the horizon. My exit strategy wasn't just a plan anymore. It was a countdown. And the clock was ticking louder every day. The days melted away, each one bringing me closer to the moment I would no longer be just the boring husband. I refined my plan until every detail was surgical. My resignation letter was saved as a draft, timed to send via secure server at the precise hour her gala speech would begin. I opened offshore accounts, transferred just enough to be invisible but enough to breathe. Nothing illegal, nothing traceable. Just clean separation. She was too distracted to notice the change, too consumed by spreadsheets, meetings, and her relentless pursuit of that executive chair. Ironically, her obsession made it easier. One morning, she tossed her phone onto the counter and sighed. "He asked if you're coming?" "Who?" I asked. "The regional director. He wants all spouses present at the gala. Optics, you know." I nodded. "Wouldn't miss it." She smiled absently and returned to her phone, never looking up. Meanwhile, I had one more piece to lock in place. I hired a discreet tech firm, explaining I needed a remote-controlled presentation to play from my phone. "Corporate stunt?" the technician asked. "Closure," I replied. He raised a brow but didn't ask further. The presentation would interrupt her speech with precision. It wouldn't humiliate, it would illuminate. A visual obituary of the man she had erased, and the birth of someone far more dangerous. The man who knew exactly how much power he'd been giving away. I spent my last weekend alone while she was off on a business retreat. In the silence, I ran final tests, timed everything down to the second. I walked through the plan until I could execute it blindfolded. Every file was encrypted. Every backup had a backup. My tuxedo was picked up, crisp and tailored. The scent I chose was deliberate, clean, assertive, impossible to forget. The night before the gala, I sat at my desk and wrote 3 letters. One was legal, one financial, and the last simply said, "Some stories must end for better ones to begin." I sealed them in white envelopes and placed them in her vanity drawer. Then I looked in the mirror, really looked, and for the first time in years, I saw him again. Me. The morning of the gala arrived wrapped in the kind of eerie calm that only comes before a storm. I moved through my routine like a man on autopilot, preparing her breakfast, ironing her blouse, nodding at her itinerary updates while sipping my coffee. She mentioned she'd head to the venue early to oversee the setup, the usual perfectionist edge in her voice. I told her I'd meet her there. She didn't question it. She never did. She was too used to me following instructions. But not tonight. Tonight I wasn't following, I was leading. Once the door shut behind her, I activated the last steps. I confirmed my flight, a red-eye to Los Angeles, connecting straight to Auckland. My luggage had already been sent ahead to a rented apartment by the coast, my new sanctuary. I deleted all browsing history, double-checked my encryption keys, and changed every password that mattered. The only thing left was the show. At precisely 3 p.m., I messaged the tech contractor station near the Gala's A/V booth. All systems go. He responded with a simple thumbs-up emoji. Clean. Professional. Untraceable. Then came the transformation. The ritual. I stepped into the shower not just to wash off the day, but to rinse off the last trace of the man I had played for so long. I shaved, trimmed, styled every detail with purpose. The tuxedo hugged my new body like it was made from intention itself, because it was. When I looked in the mirror, it wasn't ego that stared back. It was freedom. Before I left, I placed the 3 letters carefully on her vanity. She'd find them when she got home, alone. The ride to the venue was silent. No music. Just the soft hum of the city outside the window, unaware of the theater about to unfold. I arrived right on time, just as the first glasses of champagne were being passed. I walked into the ballroom with my head high, nodding politely to people who didn't quite recognize me. And then I saw her. She was radiant, magnetic, and for the first time, she noticed me, not as a background character, but with genuine surprise. "You look different," she said. "Tonight's about transformation," I replied. She had no idea how true that was. Dinner blurred into a symphony of silverware and empty corporate compliments. I sat beside her, smiling on cue, laughing when appropriate, sipping champagne while watching the room closely. She was in her element, working the crowd, effortlessly charming executives, boasting about quarterly numbers like a prizefighter flashing medals. But every time she introduced me, it was with that same old line. "This is my husband. He keeps the bills paid." The crowd chuckled politely. I chuckled too. They thought it was a joke. They didn't know it was my launch pad. Across the room, the tech specialist gave me a subtle nod. Everything was ready. Showtime. The company president stood, tapped his glass, and the room quieted. The spotlight hit the podium. Applause. Applause. Then her name. She stood with practiced grace, kissed me lightly on the cheek, and ascended the stage. Her voice was calm, confident. "This promotion isn't just mine," she said. "It belongs to my team, my mentors, and to my husband, who's always been by my side. Dependable. Constant." She turned and waved toward me. That same dismissive wave. That's when I reached into my jacket pocket, pulled out my phone, and pressed a single button. 3 seconds later, the ballroom lights dimmed. The massive screen behind her flickered, glitching briefly before locking into place. The company logo disappeared, replaced by a stark black screen with 3 words in crisp white font, "The Boring Husband." The audience gasped. Confused murmurs broke out. She turned to look, her brow furrowing as she began to panic. The presentation launched with my recorded voice, steady and composed. "For 15 years, I played the role you gave me. Quiet. Reliable. Forgettable. But tonight, I'd like to reintroduce myself." A split screen of photos appeared, before and after. The man she remembered, soft, stooped, tired. Then the man I had become, lean, alive, fierce. The ballroom fell silent. Eyes darted from the screen to her, then back to me. Her face paled. She stepped back from the podium, frozen. And I just watched, calmly, as the world saw what she never bothered to notice. I was no longer her shadow. I was my own name, on my own terms. The presentation unfolded like a slow-moving storm, quiet at first, but impossible to stop. My voice narrated over images of me rock climbing, piloting a small aircraft, skydiving, and standing atop cliffs overlooking vast oceans. This isn't a story of revenge, my voice continued. It's a story of rediscovery. Of a man who realized being dependable doesn't mean being invisible. Footage played of my transformation, time-lapse at the gym, video clips from flight school, climbing walls, passport stamps. The room sat in stunned silence. Then came the real sting, a rapid sequence of her own words, spliced from various public events, each one echoing a version of the same line. Just my boring husband. Over and over. Her voice. Her tone. Her hand wave. The audience started to shift uncomfortably. Her colleagues exchanged glances. Some winced. One woman shook her head, whispering, "That's brutal." Still, I made no move. I stood by my table, unmoving, sipping what would be my final glass of champagne in that world. The screen showed documents. My new position with the company in New Zealand, the business card from the international director, the apartment lease, the confirmation of my relocation. All dated, signed, verified. My future no longer theoretical. Then, the final slide, a countdown timer, 60 seconds, beneath it the words. Effective immediately. That's when she stepped off the stage and approached me, panic behind her eyes, her voice a frantic whisper. "What are you doing?" I looked at her calmly. "I'm introducing myself properly. We'll talk at home." She hissed, eyes scanning the crowd, fighting to maintain her professional smile. "There is no more home," I said simply. "The papers were filed this morning. My flight leaves tonight." Her mouth opened to speak, but no words came. The timer hit 30 seconds. I adjusted my tuxedo jacket, removed my wedding ring, and placed it gently on the linen-covered table. "I wish you all the best," I said sincerely. "You've earned this promotion. I've earned my freedom." The timer hit 0. And like a perfectly rehearsed act, the emergency doors behind me opened. My ride was waiting. No applause. No goodbye. Just the silence of a curtain falling on a role I'd outgrown. I walked out without looking back, my steps steady, my pulse calm. Behind me, the screen displayed one final line in bold, clean letters. "The boring husband has left the building." I heard gasps, a few awkward chuckles, but mostly stunned silence. By the time I reached the curb, the car door was already open. The driver nodded. "Airport?" I nodded back. "Yes." As we pulled away, I caught one last glimpse of the ballroom glowing in the distance. Her glowing world, now dimmed by a truth she couldn't control. The airport felt like a portal. I moved through it with a quiet sense of purpose, untethered. No baggage claim. No long goodbyes. Just a one-way ticket to the life I'd been planning while everyone thought I was standing still. The flight lifted off just after midnight. As the lights of Los Angeles vanished beneath the clouds, I closed my eyes and let go of the weight I'd carried for over a decade. I didn't cry. I didn't gloat. I simply exhaled. Auckland greeted me with sea wind, sunlit cliffs, and a stillness I hadn't felt in years. The cottage I'd rented was modest, beautiful, and entirely mine. No shared closets. No unspoken resentment in the hallway. Just clean space and endless air. I started working within a week. Financial strategy for an adventure tourism company that respected my mind and never once called me boring. Colleagues treated me as a professional, not as someone's plus one. They didn't know my backstory. I didn't need them to. I was present. I was alive. My days filled with climbing, sailing, even a few quiet dates. I was honest, divorced, rebuilding, reinventing. Some women liked the story. Some didn't. That was fine. I wasn't performing anymore. Meanwhile, news from home trickled in. Our house sold fast. The divorce processed with surprising ease. Maybe she knew she'd already lost long before the papers were signed. There were rumors that her gala moment, what should have been her crowning victory, had become the company's most whispered scandal. I didn't care. I had stopped living in rooms where I wasn't seen. My name was my own again. And this life? It was just getting started. Weeks turned into months, and each day added a new layer to the man I had become. I wasn't just free, I was fulfilled. I hiked volcanic trails on weekends, learned to sail during warm Pacific evenings, and finally started writing the business plan for an expedition firm I dreamed about in college. People listened when I spoke. Not because I raised my voice, but because I spoke with clarity I'd earned. One evening, during a networking conference in Sydney, I presented financial projections for our company's expansion into the South Pacific. The crowd was engaged, receptive. Afterward, while weaving through the post-event reception, I heard a voice behind me, soft, familiar, uncertain. "Michael?" I turned. She stood there, glass of wine in hand, face unreadable for a moment. Recognition slowly settled in her eyes like fog lifting off a cold lake. "I didn't know you'd be here," she said. "Last-minute delegation switch," I answered calmly. Her gaze moved across my frame, my posture, the suit, the ease in my expression. "You look different." "I am," I said simply. She tried to smile, but it trembled. "I've thought about what happened. A lot. I know I made mistakes. We both did," I replied, without accusation. "But some mistakes are doors. Once you close them, you realize there's a better view on the other side." She looked down. "I didn't see you." "Not really. I'm sorry for that." I nodded. "And I didn't let myself be seen." "That's on me." A colleague of mine approached, asking for my thoughts on a proposal. I turned back to her briefly. "You'll do well here. It's a good place for reinvention." She nodded, unable to find anything more to say. I walked away without anger, without triumph. Just peace. Some stories don't need final chapters filled with drama or revenge. Sometimes, it's enough just to walk away better than you were. That night, overlooking the Sydney harbor from my hotel room, I realized something simple and beautiful. I didn't need the past to explain my worth anymore. My story had already said everything it needed to. And the next chapter? It was mine to write, entirely. The final step in closing that old chapter came not with a bang, but with a quiet email the following morning. It was from her. Short, professional, polite. "I saw your presentation yesterday. I just wanted to say, I hope you're doing well. You look like you found what you were missing." I stared at the message for a moment, not feeling much at all. No bitterness. No triumph. Just stillness. I typed back a simple reply. "Thank you. I'm exactly where I need to be. I wish you clarity and peace too." And with that, it was done. No dramatic goodbye. No tug of old strings. Just two people who had written the final words of a shared story and folded the book closed. I went on with my day, coffee with a colleague, a meeting with Pacific investors, a swim at sunset. This was my life now, not curated for someone else's spotlight, but lived moment by moment, exactly as I chose. The man I had become no longer needed to prove anything to anyone. He had already done it. Quietly. Precisely. Powerfully. And as for the man I used to be, the one who stood silent at her side for years, unseen and belittled, he had served his time. He had stayed too long at a table that no longer fed him. But he had left with grace. Not vengeance. Not rage. Just truth. That was his final act. And mine? Mine had only just begun. I was no longer the boring husband. I was the man who left the room they never thought he'd walk away from. And I did it with a calm they'll never forget. If you stayed until the end, thank you. Some stories aren't about revenge, they're about rising. Would you have walked out too? Tell us in the comments. And if this story struck a chord, like, subscribe, and hit that bell. Because the next one? It's even sharper. Don't miss it.